Hey everybody, this is Hey Vern on the Lost Marble Forum. I'm going to be demonstrating a technique for doing a sign that a character can hold. Um, I'm just using a character wizard character as as my test subject here. He volunteered. I think he held up a sign. Anyway, to start with, I have a sign layer. It's just one layer, one vector layer with a little sign drawn, and it's created to match the width of the shoulders or the reach of the arms. If the sign were really wide, then his arms wouldn't be able to reach it. So you got to keep that in mind when you're doing this stuff. Minor little thing. And then we've got our character layer. He's all set up and ready to go. As you can see, I sort of have some keyframes already done. I've basically just animated one arm of the character that's holding the sign. I've left the other arm unanimated. I'll show you how to line that up later. Basically, this setup can only have one. It can only have one arm attached to the sign. The sign can only be attached to one arm, and you can't have the other hand linked to it in any way. You have to do that by hand. There might be other ways to fake that with a different rig, but if you've already got a rig set up and you don't want to deal with it, then this is probably the easiest and most effective way, and it doesn't look half bad. I mean, you can tweak the position of the bones to match up with the sign very easily, and I believe it's easier than the poster on the forum's original technique was to duplicate the hands on top of another layer of the sign and then keeping the hands lined up, and that's just really crazy and hard to do. It requires so many extra keys. This doesn't require as much effort. And this will, of course, will only work if you're using bones to animate your character. It's really a bone technique. If you're using point motion for your animation or like sort of a frame by frame type technique, then you're on your own with that. But I'm pretty sure that from the description of the issue that the poster on the forum was probably using bones. So this technique, instead of putting the hands outside of the character layer to be on top of the sign, I'm putting the sign in the character layer below the hands. Now you can see here, here's hand right and here's hand left all the way down here, because the hand it's 3/4 view and the hand's all the way behind the body. So the one thing I am going to have to do, now you could do this with animated layer order. If you didn't like having this hand in front of the body, you could do animated layer order, or you could figure out some other way to do it. But just to keep things straightforward, I'm going to be moving the hand. Now I have to move the hand and the forearm layer, forearm patch have to both come up to above the sign layer. So if I'm putting the sign layer at the top, I'm going to bring this up to the same spot where the hand is. I'll keep it below the hands. So put it there, and I know it looks goofy right now, but with the animated keyframes, and once again, you can animate the layer order. I've turned on animated layer order just in case I wanted to demonstrate that, and I could actually do that right now. Let's do this. Let's put this back where, well, let's just leave it the way it is for now. I can animate it here. What I'll do is I'll bring this down. I believe it was here. Yes. Okay. So now that hand is below, and it goes behind, but in reality, it's going to be animated well above that. So I'm just going to bring that back up, and I'll put it right under the. I'll just put it there. Okay, because we're going to be moving that anyway. Now, if you were dealing with the arm coming up from behind, then that would be a different issue, and you can handle that as a separate part of the animation with layer order animation, however you want to figure it out. But this is really the best way to do it. If you did it in any other way, like having the hands outside of the layer, you'd still have the same situation, especially if it's a 3/4 view. Probably shouldn't have chosen a 3/4 view to demonstrate this. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to layer 0 and move the sign into the character layer. That's the first thing I'm going to do. And then I'm going to select all the points. I'm going to put them at 0. Now my original idea was to have just one bone for the sign, but I discovered a little issue with it, so I'm actually going to add an extra bone. It's only for my use. You don't need to use this extra bone, but for me it just made more sense. It allowed me to give more animation to the bone. The bone to control the sign has to be at the base of the sign. It's going to have to be down here. So that means you can only animate the throne sign afterwards by animating this bone way down here. What if you wanted to have it spin around at the center of gravity? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add two bones. I'm going to add a little one down here that holds the main sign, and then I'm going to add an extra one up here that's only for the throne sign. And I'll show you how that works. It's a pretty straightforward setup. So the first thing I want to do is add my new bone. So I'm going to add a bone here to the hand. This is the hand that's going to be holding the sign. Remember, only one hand can hold the sign. So I'm going to add this bone here. And it's rotated at 90 degrees. And I'm just going to change its length to 1.01. Oh wait, that's really short. I think I need to make it bigger. Oh yeah, we'll make it 0.06. I just like to use round numbers for something like this just to keep my head straight in case I need those values. I also want the translation to be 0, 0 because it's hooked to the hand. And now I'm going to add an extra bone, and this is only for the throne sign. This isn't for anything else. This is just for the throne sign. I'm just trying to decide where to put it. Well, I'll figure that out. I'll just put it right here. Actually, no, I don't need that bone. Never mind. Okay, here we go. So there's the bone for the regular sign. This is the sign that the character will be holding. So I go to this sign here, and I'm going to bind the layer to that bone. So the sign is bound to the bone layer. Now I need to bring the sign down below the right and left hand. So I'm going to bring it down here. And now what we want to do is we have to orient the sign. We have to orient the sign layer to the orientation it's going to be to work correctly. Now I've already set the switch layer for this hand to be a fist. So now I'm just rotating. I'm rotating and translating the layer so that it lines up with that hand. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the bone. Bone probably shouldn't be attached to the hand itself at the base. I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to pull it down here and just get that set up so it's at the center of the hand itself. It doesn't really matter because as long as that bone is a child of the hand, it'll stay in its position. So we've got that sign is all set up, and if we go to frame 1, I've already got the animation, and you can see here that the sign is upside down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate that sign bone around like this so it's oriented correctly, and that makes sense. Alright, you could bind the sign to the hand bone, but it's easier to have an extra bone so that you can do things like what I just did there. The sign wasn't oriented correctly, or maybe I want it to be sort of moving around on its own, or I can translate it and it slides out. But you don't want it to throw the sign away using this bone, because the problem is it's still linked to the hand, and it's going to spin around when the arm moves. So we want its own separate connector for that. Now the next step is we're going to duplicate the sign. Sign's done, he's ready to go. We're going to duplicate it and name that new layer throne sign, and we're going to create a new bone for that. So let's go up here. Now what I want to do is I'm going to create a bone that is not a child of any other bone. So I deselect all the bones, no bone is selected. I'm going to create a new bone. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to initially line it up because I want it to be exactly in the same position as this other bone. But there's no way to do that with typing in values. You have to just do it by eyeball. So I'm just going to line up the points here, get it as close as possible to the same orientation, same position. That's close enough. I made it slightly bigger so I can tell the difference between the two. So I'm going to name this one, I'm going to name the bone throne sign just to make it easier. I'll name the other bone. See there, I can select that other bone. I'll call this one sign. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bind the throne sign. I'm not going to bind it to that bone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create an extra bone. I was talking about the being able to rotate the sign at the center of gravity. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a new bone here just for rotating the sign, and it doesn't have to be oriented in a specific way. This is the bone which is a child of this sign bone. Okay, this is the bone that now I can independently animate the sign itself. If I don't touch that bone, nothing happens. It's everything works from this other bone. But this just gives me a little bit of extra ability to animate just the throne sign. You only have to do this with the throne sign. So this is the sign. This is the bone. I'm gonna bind the throne sign to this bone. Okay, instead of this bone. So now we're all set up and ready to go. The next step is this throne sign needs to be turned off, so it needs to be hidden. I'm turning off its visibility. It's now invisible. So we got that and we got that. Alright, so now if you go down the timeline, we have our sign up here. La-di-da-di-da, he's waving it around. And now we still need to get the other arm to line up with that. So I'm going to rotate him up. And see here, you can see already I need to move this other bone for the sign. And actually I should translate it down a little bit so that it can reach the other arm. And now I'm going to just rotate this arm into position. We want to make sure his hand is turned the right way to hold the sign. And we'll do this. And I need to get the sign below the left hand, so I turned on that animated layer ordering, so I'm going to bring this down here. Actually, it just needs to go right there. Oh no, hand left. Okay, there we go. Alright, so there we go. So now the sign's in the right place. So frame 1, it's attached to the sign. Now if we go, and it's pretty close. I mean, I really didn't have to do much else, but it's drifting a little bit because the other arm is moving. So let's check where the keyframes are for the other arm. I think they're all in the same, pretty much the same spot. So let's go here and let's rotate this up and get it lined up. Maybe I'll tweak him a little bit so it's down a little bit. This is why I turned off bone constraints for this character. This is a character wizard character. I didn't like the bone constraints. Too limiting. Alright, so there he's there. And you can see it's a little rough. You may have to tweak it a little bit. Get it just right. Put in a few extra keys. But it's pretty close. And then he gets here. And then there. And let's see if I can get this here. Oftentimes using linear keyframes makes this a little easier. So you just have to tweak it into position. But it's not that hard. And it's a lot easier than trying to get the hands to line up if they're not in the body layer. Okay, so now we get to the end, and we want to make sure all these bones are keyed. We get to the end here, and he's getting ready to throw it. It comes out loose from his hand, and he throws the sign. Okay, but now it's still stuck to his hand, so we want to get rid of it. So right at this keyframe, this is the last keyframe. I've decided he's going to let go of the sign. I'm going to change his. He throws the sign, and so now what we want to do is we want to take the regular sign layer and we're going to turn it off. It's invisible. We're going to turn on the throne sign so it shows up. And whoops, where's the throne sign? Well, it's way down here because we didn't animate the bone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my bone layer. I'm going to I'm not going to animate this big bone, that's for later. I'm only going to animate this little one, because what we want to do is we want to line it up here with this bone here. This is where the bone that the original sign was oriented to. So I'm going to rotate this bone around, get a zoom in, and just get it right into position. Now, of course, that means this bone is going to be animating from frame 0, but who cares? We don't even see it until we get to this frame. It's invisible, so it doesn't really matter. You can go in and fix that if you want, just because it's annoying. But so basically, now we have the regular sign is invisible. At this point, the new sign becomes visible, and now it's free floating, and you can do anything you want with it. So you come out here, you just threw the sign. So I'm going to continue animating this bone here. I'm going to pull it out here, and now pull it. Let's see. Come out here, and I'll pull it down here. And this is why I liked having this extra bone, because now I can go in here, and instead of trying to spin it around the base of the sign, I can spin this bone and do all kinds of crazy, wacky stuff with it. It just, I forgot to keyframe that. Hold on a second. I did reset it. Reset. Alright, there we go. So we needed a keyframe for that extra bone. So it comes here, and then it hits, and I can have it spin around some more. Whatever. And you can even translate that bone if you wanted to. So there he goes there. Now you can see when I throw the bone, it's not moving very quickly. So we want to make that a little more faster. So I'm going to go up, pull this translation keyframe up. So he throws it. Let's get these keys here moved around, and I'm just sort of free-forming here, and there he goes. So it's pretty straightforward. The tricky part of the whole situation is, the creating the new bones isn't that hard. That's easy. The tricky part is that only one hand can be assigned to the sign, can be bound to that sign and stick to it. The other hand bone and arm bones have to be rotated in order to line up with the sign. But it's tricky, and it might be a little more work than you'd want, but it's not that hard to do, and it can be done. I think what I'll do is I'll move that switch key a little sooner. And you see that, and he throws it, and he releases, and I'll keyframe right there for the right hand. I'll say open, and oops, wrong one. Open. There's two opens. Why are there two opens? Alright, well, obviously that's a problem. Point. And it's backwards too. I must have an extra layer in there. Don't know why. Let's go to frame 0 and figure this one out. Yeah, one of the layers was named incorrectly. It should be open back, so that's the one I want to use here. So I'm switching to that. And so that's it. So he's holding the sign. He throws it, releases it, and then we can bring his hands back down to the normal position. And as you can see here, this hand is obviously misaligned. It should be lower. So I'm just going to move these keys a little there, and so what I'll do is I'll wait till, let's see where it would be a good spot, right there. I'm going to keyframe the layer order for the left arm. So left hand, forearm patch, drag it down here. I'll put it behind it, yeah. and so that everything's cool, and then boom, and then it goes behind. So basically I just animated layer order, and you can see there's a layer order key. So you can play around with that. Depends on how your character's set up. So that's about it. I think I did it. Let's just play it through and watch the magic. So he's waving the sign, and he throws it. And that works pretty well. It's not Pixar, but it's definitely something. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this helps you out. I hope you learned something from it, and I'll see you guys next time.